There is a surreal, almost hallucinatory quality to the modern political landscape. We have entered an era where the lines between high-stakes courtroom drama, presidential campaigning, and late-night television comedy have not just blurred. They have completely dissolved into a single chaotic television show. If you want to understand the exact state of this strange new reality, you do not need to look at swing state polling data. You do not need to analyze complex geopolitical strategies or read white papers from Washington think tanks. You simply need to observe what happens when a late-night comedian refuses to take the bait thrown by a political dynasty, and how that refusal drives that dynasty to the absolute brink of a public meltdown. Imagine for a moment the sheer crushing pressure of the situation surrounding the Trump family. They were facing a massive $250 million civil fraud trial. This was not a minor legal skirmish. It was an existential threat playing out in a wood-paneled courtroom in Lower Manhattan, a legal battle that threatened to entirely dismantle the family's real estate empire, strip them of their business licenses in New York, and drain their financial reserves. Simultaneously, the patriarch of the family was running a turbulent, highly pressurized campaign to return to the presidency. Under that kind of immense pressure, you would expect a political campaign to be laser-focused on the economy, on national security, on health care, or on any of the material issues that actual voters worry about at their kitchen tables. But that is not what happened. Instead, Donald Trump stepped up to the podium at a political rally in Indiana, Pennsylvania. He was standing in front of thousands of his most dedicated supporters. The cameras were rolling. The political world was watching. And what did the man seeking the highest office in the land choose to talk about? He chose to talk about Jimmy Kimmel. Specifically, he launched into a bitter, venomous review of Jimmy Kimmel's performance hosting the Academy Awards, an event that, it is crucial to remember, had happened more than 6 months prior. For reasons that defy conventional political logic, the former president stood at a rally in a critical battleground state and delivered a disjointed airing of Hollywood grievances. He looked out at the crowd and asked if there had ever been a worse host than Jimmy Kimmel at the Oscars. He critiqued Kimmel's opening monologue, calling it the work of a less-than-average person trying too hard to be something which he is not and never can be. He even went so far as to suggest that the ABC television network should fire Kimmel and replace him with the veteran news anchor George Stephanopoulos, whom he predictably insulted in the process. It was a strange, deeply revealing moment. It exposed a fundamental truth about the former president's psychology, his absolute, unshakable obsession with Hollywood approval and cultural relevance. Long after the golden statues were handed out and the celebrities went home, the joke was still actively burning a hole in his mind. But the target of that lingering anger was watching. And Jimmy Kimmel's reaction is where this story transcends a simple celebrity feud and becomes a masterclass in modern media warfare. If Kimmel were operating under the standard rules of political outrage, he would have walked out onto his stage in Los Angeles the next night and delivered a breathless, furious monologue. He would have expressed deep performative outrage about the dangers of a political leader targeting private citizens. He would have yelled. He would have demanded apologies. He did none of those things. Instead, Kimmel walked out to his desk, looked dead into the camera, and simply played the tape of the Pennsylvania rally. He asked his studio audience if they could guess which former president had just posted those exact same grievances on his social media platform. And then, with the casual, effortless timing of a man who fully understands that his opponent is handing him free material, Kimmel smiled. He thanked the former president for watching his show. And then he delivered a single, devastatingly simple line. "Isn't it past your jail time?" There was no rage in his voice. There was no self-righteous lecturing. It was just a man looking at a spectacularly absurd situation and letting the joke write itself. The contrast was startling, the searing, red-faced heat of the political rally versus the cool, detached irony of the late-night desk. But the story does not end with a single punchline, because the context of when this was happening is what makes the dynamic so uniquely fascinating. While the patriarch of the family was endlessly replaying the Academy Awards in his head at rallies in Pennsylvania, his eldest son, Donald Trump Jr., was currently sitting on the witness stand in that exact same devastating New York fraud trial. The son was brought into court to defend the family business against allegations of massive, systematic financial deception. The prosecution was methodically going through years of financial statements, pointing out properties that were allegedly overvalued by staggering margins to secure favorable loans and insurance rates. And Donald Trump Jr.'s legal defense under oath was essentially weaponized ignorance. As the executive vice president of the Trump Organization, a man with his name on the building and his signature on the documents, his primary argument to the judge was that he should not be held responsible for the actual numbers. His rationale was brilliantly, tragically simple. He pays a massive, expensive Big Five accounting firm millions of dollars to do the math. He testified that he relies on these highly paid accountants, and therefore he cannot possibly be expected to know more than them when he signs off on the final financial statements. If you pause to apply that exact legal logic to the real world, the absurdity becomes overwhelming. It is the equivalent of an insurance company suing a patient for listening to the medical advice of their doctor. The accountants did it is a fascinating, desperate defense for a man whose entire public persona is built on the image of a ruthless, hyper-competent business titan. He was essentially arguing that he was merely a highly paid rubber stamp, totally unaware of the financial realities of his own family's empire. And then, during that very same grueling trial, the son made a claim so utterly detached from reality that it sounded less like legal testimony and more like a discarded script from a television sitcom. While attempting to praise his father's business acumen, Donald Trump Jr. testified that his father was the visionary genius who invented the concept of the hotel gym. He sat in a court of law and claimed that perhaps someone, somewhere, had put a gym in a building before, but absolutely no one did it at the massive, luxurious scale of his father. He boldly, proudly declared to the court that Donald Trump is the undisputed father of the hotel gym. This is a claim made about a man who famously, publicly avoids cardiovascular exercise. The former president has frequently discussed his personal belief that the human body operates like a non-rechargeable battery, born with a finite amount of energy that is permanently depleted by strenuous physical activity. Yet, according to his son's sworn testimony, this man is the pioneer of the global fitness amenity industry. When Jimmy Kimmel heard this testimony, he did what has become his signature move. He did not yell. He did not act overly shocked. He did not invite a panel of legal experts to debate the perjury implications. He simply went on national television and read the exact quotes out loud to his audience. He stated the facts. Don Jr. testified that his father is the father of the hotel gym. He let the audience process the fact that the father of the hotel gym is a man who has likely never stepped inside one. The studio audience laughed. Kimmel moved on. No dwelling, no outrage, just the presentation of the next receipt. And this incredibly calm, mirror-like approach is exactly what caused the outrage machine surrounding the Trump family to predictably, spectacularly short-circuit. Donald Trump Jr. watched the late-night monologue, and rather than letting the joke fade into the endless ether of the daily news cycle, he took to the internet and posted a furious, seething response. He fell back on the comfortable, well-worn tropes of his political movement, ranting about out-of-touch Hollywood elites and liberal media bias. But his followers needed more than just an angry social media post. They required a narrative of absolute victimhood and aggressive retaliation. And so, the right-wing internet ecosystem did what it does best. It manufactured a completely fake reality. Within hours of the monologue, a bizarre, fabricated story began spreading like wildfire across social media platforms and fringe political blogs. The rumor mill generated a narrative that Don Jr. was so furiously offended by Kimmel's jokes about the trial that he actually ran to the police. The internet claimed that the son of the former president had called law enforcement on a late-night talk show host. It was a brilliant, terrifying piece of modern digital fiction. If you looked for the facts, they did not exist. There was no police precinct involved. There was no incident report number filed. There were no detectives assigned to the case. There was no actual crime committed, because mocking a public figure's testimony on television is the bedrock of the First Amendment. But the truth did not matter to the machine. What mattered was the aesthetic of retaliation. The fake stories were accompanied by hyper-dramatic clickbait thumbnails. They featured digitally inserted flashing red sirens. They plastered the word breaking in bold, capitalized yellow letters across a story that had broken absolutely nothing in the real world. The internet had to invent a fake police standoff just to process the psychological humiliation of a late-night host calmly reading a court transcript. The political base needed to believe that their cultural enemies were not just being insulted, but were facing imminent legal or physical punishment by the state. The idea of running to the police over a joke perfectly encapsulates the fragility hiding behind the loud, aggressive posturing of modern political grievance. When Kimmel returned to the air the following night, his reaction to the fake police rumor was incredibly telling. He did not dedicate a 20-minute segment to debunking the lies. He did not express fear or outrage about the coordinated disinformation campaign against him. He briefly, casually laughed at the sheer pathetic nature of the fake police rumor, and then he moved right back to reading the receipts from the ongoing fraud trial. There is a distinct pattern here, a deep psychological architecture to how this family operates in the public sphere, and Jimmy Kimmel is one of the few people in media who seems to have entirely decoded it. The former president and his family desperately need to be victims. Victimhood is not just a byproduct of their politics. It is their primary product. It is the absolute core of their entire business model. Every perceived insult, every negative court ruling, every critical newspaper article, and every late-night monologue joke must be immediately repackaged as targeted, coordinated persecution. It is then sold back to their supporters as definitive proof that the entire system, the courts, the media, the entertainment industry, is rigged against them. They rely on the oxygen of conflict. If you fight back with anger, you validate their grievance. If you scream at them, you give them the footage they need to prove they are under attack. But Kimmel refuses to play his assigned role in their script. His response to the chaos is the exact same every single night. He removes the emotion, he lists what happened, he reads the direct quotes verbatim, he displays the erratic social media posts on the screen. He lets his audience and the broader public notice the exhausting, repetitive pattern for themselves. At one point in this ongoing saga, the former president became so deeply irritated by Kimmel's calm, mirroring technique that he escalated the attacks in a deeply personal way. In another rambling social media rant, he brought up Kimmel's wife. He mangled the original Oscar quote yet again, demonstrating a bizarre inability to remember the sequence of events he was so angry about. He lashed out with the kind of crude playground insults that have become his trademark, calling the comedian one of the dumbest human beings ever to walk the earth. This was the moment that usually breaks people. When a powerful political figure targets your family, the natural human instinct is to drop the comedic persona and engage in a bitter, defensive war of words. It is the moment where late-night hosts usually get serious, look directly into the camera, and deliver a stern lecture about decency and boundaries. Kimmel ignored the instinct. He recognized the trap. Instead of getting angry, he went on national television and noted, with a look of mock pity, that the former president's cognitive abilities appeared to be declining even faster than the stock price of his social media company. He suggested that Trump simply couldn't remember what was actually said at the Academy Awards, and then Kimmel delivered the absolute masterstroke of the entire feud. To help the former president remember the exact words spoken that night, Kimmel offered to send him some commemorative merchandise. He reached under his desk and held up an array of products: coffee mugs, T-shirts, tote bags, all beautifully printed with the phrase that started it all, "Isn't it past your jail time?" He turned the absolute frothing anger of a political movement into retail merchandise. He monetized the feud. He called the merchandise a gift to help a struggling, forgetful man remember his own public humiliation. The studio audience erupted. They howled with laughter, not just because the mugs were funny, but because they were watching something incredibly rare. They were watching someone take the exact same aggressive, dominance-oriented playbook that the Trump family uses on everyone else and run it perfectly in reverse. For years, the political strategy of the right has been to say something outrageous, wait for the left to become hysterical with anger, and then fundraise off the resulting liberal tears. Kimmel flipped the board. He allowed the former president and his son to become hysterical. He remained entirely stoic, and then he sold coffee mugs commemorating their meltdown. There is a profound reason why this specific dynamic drives the political outrage machine so crazy, and why it is so highly effective. Every single time Donald Trump Jr. posts a furious, capitalized rebuttal online complaining about late-night comedians, he inadvertently reminds millions of people that the original joke landed perfectly. He proves that the punchline drew blood. Every time his father brings up a 6-month-old award show at a political rally meant to be about inflation or border security, he hands a comedy writer's room in Los Angeles another free, totally unscripted clip of a man losing his grip on reality. Every time the internet machine prints a fake, desperate story about Don Jr. calling the cops to arrest a comedian, the audience at home leans slightly closer to the person calmly reading the receipts. The heirs to this real estate and political empire have to get incredibly loud because volume is the absolute only product they have left in the warehouse. In a modern political culture that explicitly financially rewards whoever screams the loudest, whoever is the most offended, and whoever can generate the most artificial outrage, maintaining a steady voice is practically an act of open rebellion. The people who share the clips of Jimmy Kimmel calmly dismantling these attacks do not share them because they are angry. The internet is already saturated with anger. They share them because they are deeply, profoundly relieved. They are relieved because someone is finally describing the bizarre, exhausting television show they have been forced to watch for the better part of a decade, and doing so without raising their voice. It is a fascinating psychological study in power and vulnerability. The man who demands to project ultimate strength cannot handle a simple joke about his bedtime. The son who wants to project the image of an apex predator businessman has to invent fake stories about calling the police because someone read his own legal testimony back to him. The noise of the political rallies, the capitalization of the social media posts, the blaring red sirens of the fake internet rumors, they are all designed to distract from the fundamental weakness at the center of the movement. But the noise only works if the other side screams back. When you simply hold up a mirror, read the transcript, and offer to sell them a coffee mug, the illusion shatters. The empire of grievance is revealed for what it truly is: a family terrified of being laughed at, constantly delivering their own punchlines, while the guy sitting at the desk just keeps his receipts organized.